from his window, he actually had 2 rooms and a veranda. 2 rooms and a veranda, and it cost 5 rupees a month. 5 rupees a month. That's what he was paying. And part of the arrangement in that 5 rupees, he also got 1 plate of Mahaprasadam from Radha Damodar. So, no problem. He's there in Vrindavan. But yet he left. And just outside his, he had 1 room that was like a sitting room, and it was a kitchen, and it's still there. You can go, you can see it. But outside from the window of that room, was the Samadhi Mandir of Srila Rupa Goswami. Now for us, we go, we have our yatra, somebody takes us, and they tell us this is this and this is that. Very nice. But for a pure devotee, it's something very different. Vrindavan. Very different. We can't experience. Why can't we experience? Because we're conditioned. Conditioned souls. We have so many anarthas within the heart. We can't experience. But still it's nice. Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada mentions in Srimad Bhagavatam, even an atheist goes to Vrindavan, he'll feel the presence of God. Even an atheist. Right? So what to speak of devotees practicing sadhana bhakti? They'll definitely experience something. But for those pure devotees of the Lord, they're seeing the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. They're experiencing. That's why they stay in Vrindavan. If we want to stay in Vrindavan, we have to tolerate heat, cold. In Uttar Pradesh, it becomes really cold, not like Bombay. Bombay, there's no cold. Used to be a little cooler. I remember the devotees used to wear some chadar and topi, right? The monkey hat, in January, in Juhu. Now nobody wears that also. It's not cold. Right? But in Vrindavan, it gets cold, and it used to get colder also. It used to get colder. So when conditioned souls go to Vrindavan, our devotees performing sadhana bhakti, they have to perform some austerities to want to stay in Vrindavan. But not for pure devotees of the Lord. They're relishing such nectar all the time. Realization after realization about the loving relationships between the Lord and His devotees. So for them, staying in Vrindavan is nectar. It's not an austerity. Therefore, we can just imagine Srila Prabhupada's leaving Vrindavan. Right? That was the austerity, to leave Vrindavan. People want to leave India today. They want to go to America, get a green card, right? Earn money, make a big bungalow, have a nice BB, a nice bacha, right? BB, bacha, bungalow. The 3 B's. not Srila Prabhupada. He was performing an austerity, leaving Vrindavan. But he was told to go. You go. He was on the order. First he was on the order of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Tried to preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the English-speaking people. Right? And also, Srila Rupa Goswami ordered him from Radha Damodar Mandir. You go. So he came. He decided to go. Right? Our benefit, he decided to go. He's independent. We all have our independence. Krishna is known as Farat. He's completely independent. And we have our minute independence. We can decide to serve Krishna or not serve Krishna. The pure devotee of the Lord only desire is to serve Krishna. What's the desire of Krishna? What makes Krishna happy? That thing he wants to do. Right? So because it was the desire of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he was ordered by Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada decided he would go to America. And in those days, he had his room in Radha Damodar, but he was spending more time in Delhi. Why was he spending time in Delhi? Because he was getting the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto printed. And all that printing work was going on in Delhi. Huh? So he was staying in a temple in a place called Chipiwada. Chipiwada. You go down a road called Naya Sarak from Chandi Chowk. There's one road called Naya Sarak. You go to the end of that road and you'll find one temple. That area is called Chipiwada. You know why it's called Chipiwada? Right? So in that road, Nayasarak, in Chipiwada, there's paper suppliers, there's printers, all in that area. And Chipi is a colloquial expression for chapna. Chapna means print, right? Wadi, Chipi Wadi, the place where they do printing. Now you see, Chipi Wadi. Huh? Understand? Good. So he was staying there, and nowadays there's no such thing as a treadle press, right? But in those days, typesetting is done on a computer, right? InDesign, or when the first computer typesetting softwares were there, PageMaker was famous. I don't think people even use PageMaker now, right? But before that, there was hand typesetting. Hand type means that one letter cast in lead, like if you want the word the, T-H-E, you have to take a T and put it on the plate. You have to take an H, put it on the plate. You have to take an E, put it on the plate, make the word the, right? And then compose the whole page. Then put that on the treadle press, put in a piece of paper, and ink would be on the roller, they call it, and that plate would roll over the ink and then come down and make an impression on the paper. Right? So after there was one page printed, that's called a proof. It's a proof. That would go to the person who would check it. He would do editing. Editing in the sense that check for typographical errors or misspellings, this, that. So in order to do that, Srila Prabhupada had to be in that area. Couldn't come every day to check the proofs from Radha Damodar Mandir in Vrindavan, right? Living in Chippiwada, there's a beautiful deity of Radha and Krishna there, and checking all these proofs, okaying them, buying paper, supplying to the printer. Sometimes he would not use a rickshaw so he could save his money. He would walk so he could use that money to buy paper, right? Getting his Srimad Bhagavatam ready. Now, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the desire of His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, we could acquire that temple in Chippiwada, the place where Srila Prabhupada stayed. Yes, it's there. It's under ISKCON's control now. Beautiful deities. I went there just after they got the place, and the room where Srila Prabhupada stayed, it's there. So next time you're in Delhi, you can go and visit that temple in Chippiwadi and have darshan. One other thing in that area that Srila Prabhupada mentions, he would give the example, in his preaching in America, he would give the example that people are interested in a pure thing, right? And Srila Prabhupada explained about a person in Chandi Chowk who sells jalebis, right? So this jalebi wala, actually he's called Famous Jalebi Wala. He has a little shop right at the end of Naya Sarak in Chandi Chowk. Just before you go on Naya Sarak, right on the corner, there's a little shop. And there he has a sign in his shop. It's still there, and I don't know, but when I went there, it was there. That if anybody can prove these jalebis are not cooked in pure ghee, I'll give you 1,000 rupees. Right? 1,000 rupees. So, people would come to his shop like anything, because it's a pure thing. Right? Pure ghee. Jalebis cooked in pure ghee. You know, jalebis cooked in dalda and jalebis cooked in pure ghee, bahut farak hai na? Dal wala nahi chahiye. Pure ghee. Taste is different. So we had the good opportunity to go there, and because Prabhupada mentioned it, of course we don't eat in sweet shops, right? Brahmacharis don't go to sweet shops. Okay. But because Srila Prabhupada mentioned it, we had those jalebis from the famous jalebi wala in Chandi Chowk. Very nice, I have to tell you. Actually, Bhagavatam, first canto of Bhagavatam was mostly translated in Chippiwadi, right? Because Srila Prabhupada had to spend time there to check the gali proofs, give it back to the printer, then the printer would make the changes, again with the hand type, right? And then give it back again to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada again had to check it. He didn't have a proofreader. When the temple wants to make a newsletter, you know, they find somebody that can proofread and somebody that can check it and alak person, different people. But Prabhupada was all alone. And he was doing everything. And he did the same for his Back to Godhead magazine. But someone told him that magazines are nice, but after some time people discard magazines. But if you print a book, right, people will keep that. So taking that instruction to heart, you can get good instructions from anywhere. And in fact, successful leaders, they take instructions, they can appreciate instructions from even someone that criticizes them. Right? There's a famous IT person who started Infosys. You heard of Infosys? Right? Famous? Narayan Das Murthy is his name. Right? Very famous person. So they asked him, what's the key? What's the key? How Infosys became so innovative and successful? He said the key is you always remain open to feedback. People may be criticizing you, but that feedback can help you do better. Right? And all the leaders that failed, the failed leaders, they closed the door to any feedback. Hitler, Nixon, just to name a few failures. Why? Because they didn't take the feedback from others. Right? This is something you should always remember. Keep open the channel of feedback. Right? It's not that, okay, I'm the president here. No, I know everything because I'm the president. So nobody can tell me anything. Therefore, this is the prescription for failure. Right? Somebody may have a good idea, and good ideas you should take. Right? What does Chanakya Pandit say? Gold from a filthy place? You're going to say, 2 kgs of gold, but it's in a filthy place. I don't want it. No. Even though it's in a filthy place, you take that gold. A good girl, even from a low-class family, right? Like that. Also, instructions. Something. When Srila Prabhupada was in America, he had a stroke. Right? He had a stroke. And all night the devotees were massaging his chest, and they didn't know what to do. They're all young boys. Srila Prabhupada had a stroke. He was paralyzed, actually. He couldn't move his arm. So what to do? It was Memorial Day weekend, 1966, Memorial Day weekend. All the doctors were off. They're chutti. Memorial Day weekend is a big holiday in America, right at the end of May. So what to do? Finally, they found this doctor, Brahmananda. Looked around, and found one doctor at home and brought him. And the doctor came, examined Srila Prabhupada. Then they went outside the storefront, or Prabhupada's flat, there on 22nd Avenue. And the doctor was saying, he's had a stroke. You have to take him to the hospital. And then the doctor said, the old man prays too much. You tell him to go out and take a walk. Then Brahmananda thought, this guy's a quack. Right? This guy's So Prabhupada actually was listening inside the room. And then Brahmananda came back inside, and Prabhupada said, "What did he say?" And he said, "Oh, Prabhupada, Swamiji, don't worry. He's not a good doctor." Then Prabhupada said, "No. He said one good thing, and that is taking a walk, proper exercise." So Prabhupada took that up. And from that time, he started his morning walks. Every day, he would take his morning walk. So we can always get good. And Prabhupada later on said that I extended my life because of morning walk. Srila Prabhupada was there in Chippiwadi, and when he finished his first canto, 3 volumes, first canto in 3 volumes, then he decided he'd go to America. And he knew Srimati Maharaj, who was the managing director of the Scindia shipping company, and she lived right over here in Juhu Beach. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada came, and he was reading his Bhagavatam. And Srimati Maharaj was part of the Pushti Marg, who worship Srinathji, Jai Shri Krishna, they chant, Shri Krishna Saranam Mama, Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Krishna, this. They're into Krishna Bhakti. And their founder, the original Acharya, was Vallabhacharya. Vallabhacharya was a contemporary of Srila Prabhupada. When Srila Prabhupada was in Allahabad, across the Jamuna, there's a place called Rail. You been there, Brajahari? Rail. So, Vallabhacharya met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Kumbh Mela. And he invited him to come to his house. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got in a boat to cross the Jamuna, to go to the house of Vallabhacharya in Rail. While Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling across the Jamuna, he became filled with ecstatic ecstasy. And he began like dancing in the boat, and the boat was rocking. And it was everything that his assistants could do to calm him. Because due to the Jamuna, thinking of Krishna, he became filled with transcendental ecstasy. So finally they crossed, and Vallabhacharya brought Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his house, and Vallabhacharya washed the feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he had his family members drink the water. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave his mercy to Vallabhacharya. Anyway, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a interesting pastime. Gadadhar Pandit was very friendly with Vallabhacharya. And he had made a commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Subodhini Darshan was the name of his commentary. So he was a little proud of his commentary, and he informed Swarup Damodar Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wouldn't hear anything unless it was passed by Swarup Damodar. So he told Swarup Damodar, my commentary is even better than Sridhar Swami's commentary. Sridhar Swami is the original commentator on Srimad Bhagavat. Of course, the original, yeah. So, when that news came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His comment was, someone who thinks they're better than the Swami is a prostitute. Right? Wife should be submissive to the husband, not think she's better. Right? So that was the comment. In other words, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to break the pride. Right? We may do something in devotional service, but we should not become proud. If we become proud, then that will disturb our devotional service. So Krishna doesn't like his devotees to be very proud. And if they become proud, he does something to cut their pride. Like Indra. Indra became very proud. And the yagya, the Indra yagya was stopped by the Lord Krishna and the cowherd men. So he thought, I'll punish them. And Krishna's whole plan was to cut Indra's pride. He had forgotten his position, Krishna's position. So that pastime is there, and anyway, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But Srila Prabhupada was preaching to Srimati Maraji, and he asked her for passage to America, to go to America on one of her steamships. Right? And that's mentioned here. The Jaladuta is a regular cargo carrier of the Scindia Steam Navigation Company, but there is a passenger cabin aboard. During the voyage from Calcutta to New York in August and September of '65, the cabin was occupied by Sri Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami, whose age was 69 and who was taken on board bearing a complimentary ticket with food. So first of all, Srila Prabhupada had to really struggle to get a passport. You know, in those days, India was known as the, what was it? It was very bureaucratic, very bureaucratic. In order to get a passport, you had to have a P form. In order to get a P form, you had to do so many things. So Srila Prabhupada was struggling just to get a passport. And in order to get the P form, it took him a long time, very long time, you know. It wasn't easy, you know. And he got sponsorship from one Mr. Agarwal that he knew. He told his son to send the sponsorship letter. And one day the sponsorship letter turned up, you know. And the boy who gave the sponsorship letter, because his father, Mr. Agarwal, told him to give the sponsorship letter, he never thought that one day on his front doorstep the Swamiji would turn up, but one day he did. Right? But in order to get there, it was very tedious, and Prabhupada had to have a lot of patience. Nobody encouraged him. In fact, Srimati Maraji, who gave him the passage on the ships, at first she was telling him, no, don't go. You're too old, right? Don't go. But he insisted. And so she agreed. But even that, it took her a long time, because she wanted the right captain to take him. You know, sailors, they're famous for doing all wrong things. You know, they talk about sailors, they have a girlfriend in every port, you know. They're like that. So she was careful. This Pandya, he was a very pious man. He didn't mess around. Even when he was on the ship, see, he traveled with his wife. Right? Wives are already there to keep husbands in line, you know. They don't go here and don't go there. Right? Very pious. So she knew that, so she made sure that this ship the captain was Captain Pandya. Right? That's not even in the Lilamrita, but I heard it from Brahmananda Prabhu. who heard it from Srila Prabhupada. So you're getting a special edition there. So this Prabhupada got his passport, got his visa, and was on this ship. And the ship was in a port in Italy, right? So just around this time, just before Janmashtami, he traveled. And on Janmashtami day, they were in a port in the Mediterranean in Italy. And there, Srila Prabhupada celebrated Janmashtami. He cooked and distributed prasadam to the crew members. Right? So, Srila Prabhupada was very thankful to Captain Pandya because he took care nicely. And when he got to America, he wanted to give something to Captain Pandya. But what did he have? He had his Bhagavatams. So he thought, I'll gift these 3 volumes, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam to Captain Pandya. And so Captain Pandya, he insisted to pay for those Bhagavatams. He didn't want to take free. So Srila Prabhupada said, okay. So Captain Pandya asked, how much are they? And Srila Prabhupada explained that they're $16.80. Now how he came to that? $16.80. Brahmananda tells the story. When he was coming to the temple, Brahmananda had also taken a ship across to India. He was looking for Guru, and he got passage on a ship by serving in the galley, what they call it. And he was serving out the crew members. And he came to India looking for Guru. So he knew something, by that trip about Guru. And he knew that you're supposed to surrender everything to Guru. So he decided that whatever money he had, he would give to the Swamiji in 26 Second Avenue. He had, some months he had been going, he had come in contact with the Swami, and so he was going there regularly. And he decided, whatever I have, I'll give. And he had quite a bit of money. It was a Jewish family. And, he had money from his bar mitzvah, which is a Jewish celebration for young men when they come of age. They get some money, and he had some stock, and he gave it all to Srila Prabhupada. And what he thought was that Srila Prabhupada will gift him the Bhagavatam. So that day he was sitting, and Prabhupada was sitting there, and he gave everything to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, oh, thank you very much. Thank you. But he didn't give the books. So Brahmananda, who was Bruce at the time, Bruce Sharaf, he was looking at the Bhagavatams and looking at Prabhupada. Prabhupada had the book sitting there and looking at Prabhupada, but Prabhupada so then he blurted out to Prabhupada, Swamiji, what about the books? And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, the books, they'll be extra. And he said, but I gave you all my money. He said, that's all right. You can pay me later. So Brahmananda felt in his heart, he felt a pinch, And he said that it took him a long time to pay that money because the pinch he felt in his heart. And how much were the books? The books were $16.80. Why? Because when Srila Prabhupada was selling the books in India, the price printed in the books was 16 rupees and 80 paisa. So when he came to America, he said $16.80. So Brahmananda explained that it took him a long time to pay that $16.80. But he said it took him even longer time to realize what Srila Prabhupada was trying to teach him. The Guru means that everything he does is for teaching, for instruction. And Brahmananda explained that the lesson he learned after a long time was that you cannot purchase a Guru. No matter what you do, it's nothing compared to what Guru has done for you. But you can only surrender to Guru. Surrender. You have to surrender to the Guru. So this is a lesson that Brahmananda learned from that particular incident. And that's why Srila Prabhupada sold those same books to Captain Pandya for $16.80. So, Srila Prabhupada came to America, and when he got off the boat, there was no one there to greet him. And he didn't know whether to go right or left. Big city he came to, like New York City, very dangerous place, Prabhupada said. New York City, very dangerous. He said, but I could survive because I was a Calcutta boy. He was from Calcutta. Later on, he went to Butler, Pennsylvania, and stayed in the house of Agarwal's son, who was married to a Western lady named Susan? Patty. Sally Agarwal. Later on, Sally did a memory tape. She told about her experience with Srila Prabhupada. And she said, those were the happiest times of her life. Can you imagine? How people were influenced by Srila Prabhupada? No? Sally Agarwal didn't do any devotional service as such, but just by associating with Srila Prabhupada, it was a memorable time in her life. There was another person, his name was Bhakta Jim, and he, just after Prabhupada left, he got connected to the Chicago temple. So Bhakta Jim wrote a book called The Life and Times of Bhakta Jim. And the book is the experiences that he had living in the Chicago temple. So later on, Bhakta Jim, he was, going to the temple and trying to become a devotee, but he became influenced by deprogrammers, and he became antagonistic to Krishna consciousness, right? And he even convinced other devotees to leave the temple. And then he went on with his life. He became a computer manual author, an author of computer manuals. You know, in the old days, when you bought a software, it came with a manual about this thick, right? So he would write those manuals. 30 years later, right? He found his diary. He had a diary and he kept about those times when he was a devotee or trying to be a devotee, right? So in that, from that diary, he noticed that it was not written too bad, even though he wrote it 30 years ago, and he spruced it up and he published a book called The Life and Times of Bhakta Jim by Bhakta Jim. And in that, even though he later on became inimical, even though he left Krishna consciousness, one important thing that he mentioned was when he thought back about those times when he was trying to be a devotee and living in the temple, he said, those were the happiest times of my life, one. And two, by associating with the devotees, I could understand that I am a soul. I could understand about the soul. So we see that even though someone becomes antagonistic to the devotees or to ISKCON, there's some spark there that leaves an indelible mark on their consciousness and their being. That's the power of devotional service. That's the power of devotional service. So, back to Sumati Murarji. You see that we have this photograph here in our temple room. Srinathji, right? And that's the deity where? Natdwar, okay? It's the main deity of the Pushti mark. But it's our deity also, right? Because this deity was installed in Govardhan Hill by Madhavinda Puri. They don't say like that. They say, where did this deity come from? No, you self-manifest, self-manifest. But we know, right? It's Madhavinda Puri's deity. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he never walked on Govardhan Hill. That's not what we do, because Govardhan is Krishna, non-different from Krishna. Can you imagine putting your feet on the Govardhan Shila here? Huh? Devotees will beat you. It's Giriraj. So Mahaprabhu never walked on Govardhan Hill. But he wanted to have darshan of the Gopal deity, Madhavinda Puri's deity. Right? And one time, due to the invasion of the Muslims, the pujaris were afraid and they brought Gopal deity from Govardhan Hill down, right? And kept in one village, hiding from the Mughals. Well, that time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could get darshan of the Gopal deity. So the picture of Srinathji is there because it's our line from Madhavinda Puri, but also because that pastime of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Vallabhacharya, when he was kind of cutting the pride of Vallabhacharya, who is a great devotee of the Lord. He propagated bhakti, pure bhakti. And in fact, Srila Prabhupada mentions in his Bhagavatam that a serious student of the Bhagavatam would do well to read all the commentaries of the Acharyas. And there he mentions Vallabhacharya's commentary also. So he's a great, great devotee of the Lord. But when they published that pastime in the Back to Godhead magazine, some of the employees of Srimati Murarji, they complained. Dekho, aisa likhte hain, back to God. So she became upset. And that news came to Srila Prabhupada. Giriraj Swami explains about it in his book. So she was concerned. She was concerned. And Srila Prabhupada wrote her a nice letter explaining the situation. That many times acharyas have conflicting views about something, but that is on their level, right? And there's no enmity as such. So she was pacified. She was pacified by Srila Prabhupada. And he told the editors of Back to Godhead magazine they should be more careful what they print. And also in order to satisfy her, we keep this photograph of Srinathji in our temple. Even though he's very much in our life. So, are there any questions? Anything you wanted to know about Srila Prabhupada's parting to America, which happened on this day many years ago? How many years ago? Over 50, right? Once he got there, yeah.
So maybe you were speaking something, you continue, after that I'll ask.
Okay. There's many interesting things that happened. Srila Prabhupada was in Sally Agarwal's house. From there he came to New York. He was living with Dr. Mishra, who was teaching yoga on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. You know, Manhattan is an island, okay? So there's certain areas of the island, the very posh areas. That's the upper Manhattan. They call it the north side. And the south side is kind of more like a slum, you know. So Srila Prabhupada was staying with Dr. Mishra on the northern side of Manhattan, a very good area. And he was living there, and he was teaching yoga, that Dr. Mishra. And he had some students, and one time he let Srila Prabhupada speak to his students. Now, Dr. Mishra was Pakka Mayavadi. And when he heard Srila Prabhupada speak, then he thought, you know, he understood that Prabhupada's a devotee of Krishna and is in the bhakti line. So after that, he suggested that Prabhupada could stay in his office, you know, where his yoga studio was instead of his, you know, in the same apartment with him. So Prabhupada shifted over there, but there was no bathroom. There was a toilet and a sink, but no shower. So Srila Prabhupada had to go from there, walk 2.5 blocks to Dr. Mishra's apartment. He would cook lunch, and then take a shower, and then he and Dr. Mishra would have lunch together, okay? So, you know, Dr. Mishra didn't know how to cook. And Srila Prabhupada's an expert cook. And the devotees in 26 Second Avenue said that, because Srila Prabhupada was doing all the cooking there in the beginning. And they remembered later very fondly about Srila Prabhupada's nectarine cooking. Nothing could match it. And even Dr. Mishra said that his health wasn't good. But after eating the Swamiji's cooking for a month or so, his health completely improved. Right? So, Srila Prabhupada mentioned he used to go to a market nearby. What was it called? The North Side Market or something, and buy supplies for the cooking of the lunch that he and Dr. Mishra would eat. And he bought some chili powder, and he remembered that it cost 25 cents for the chili powder. And he thought, Srila Prabhupada thought that was outrageous to charge so much money just for a little chili powder. In India it would be hardly anything. So like that, Srila Prabhupada was staying, and he would relate all these things to the devotees later on. I mean, Gargamuni, his book is out. It's called Gargamuni. That was a name that Gargamuni got from Srila Prabhupada, because the first treasurer of ISKCON was Gargamuni. He was the treasurer. And he didn't know anything about treasurer. He was only 18 years old when he joined. Right? And but Srila Prabhupada taught him how to do accounts, how to keep track. And Srila Prabhupada was very particular about accounting. If you look in his diary, he writes how much he spent for the bus, how much he spent for supplies, everything. He meticulously kept track of. Everything. So that's a very important part of Krishna consciousness. It's not just about, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. No. The proper organization has to be there too. You may think that you're a big preacher, but if you're not meticulous in organization, you're not preaching at all. Because what will happen is, Prabhupada said, we don't want to be like Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great conquered so many different countries and so many different places he conquered. But when he went on to a new conquering place, the place that he just conquered, he would lose it, right? Because he didn't have a proper managerial infrastructure there. So he said, we don't want to be like that, right? We want preaching. Preaching should happen, but organization should also be there. It's very important to organize things properly. There should be like Srila Prabhupada set the example, proper accounting. And Gargamuni learned that, right? That was his first service for Srila Prabhupada, was to do accounting. One of the next things that he did was, he explains in the book, it's very interesting, is that one devotee joined and he gave Prabhupada $400. And with that, he told, our Gargamuni saw in the advertisement of the paper that there was this one institution that was selling their mimeograph machines. Like a mimeograph machine is a printing machine, just in-house thing where you could type out on a stencil and then that would print out something, right, called mimeograph. Nobody heard of it nowadays, right? You never heard of a mimeograph machine, no. But in the 60s it was very popular. Before there were Xerox photocopying machines, there were mimeograph machines. So this institution was selling, they had two of them and they were selling it. So Srila Prabhupada said, okay, let's go. So the Swamiji went with Greg, who was Gargamuni, Greg, and they went to this place where and it was an old Jewish guy. You know Jewish people? You don't know Jewish people. Jewish people are very tight. More tight than Sindhis, more tight than Marwadis. Jewish, okay? They're very tight. So this Jewish guy, he had the two machines, and for each machine he wanted $150, that means $300. Okay? Srila Prabhupada preached to him. He told him about our mission, what we're doing, what he was doing. He came from India. And finally, he got both machines for $150. Srila Prabhupada ki. Gargamuni's older brother, Bruce, who became Brahmananda, he got initiated first. And in the first initiations. So Srila Prabhupada asked Greg, you also want to get initiated? And he said, no, I'll wait, I'll see, I'll think, you know. So Brahmananda got initiated. And Brahmananda's mother came to the fire sacrifice. Okay, so she was there. And after the fire sacrifice, Prabhupada told Brahmananda, now go touch your mother's feet. Do pranam. It's an unheard of thing in America. You know, nobody touches anybody's feet in America. But he did, as Prabhupada said. So then Prabhupada began speaking to Mrs. Sharaf and saying that we're propagating Krishna consciousness all over the world. Would you like to give a donation to help? And she said, I've already given you my 2 sons, and now you're asking for money? So later on, Gargamuni could realize that Srila Prabhupada did that just to get it confirmed by their mother that she had given their sons. And from that time on, Gargamuni and Brahmananda realized that they belonged to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. So, yeah, you had a question?
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for narrating such wonderful statements, Prabhupada. So, could you please explain what Prabhupada replied to Sumati Morarji in the little detail about Vallabhacharya's issue?
If you want to know in detail, there's a letter that he wrote to her. It's in I'll Build You a Temple. You read that. Okay. You'll get it. Did you read that book yet?
I did not read it.
I'll Build You a Temple. Did you read it yet?
I have not yet read.
Okay, then you need to read that.
Okay.
Actually, we need to read all the books that are there because, you know, Srila Prabhupada's legacy gets carried on in different ways. One of the ways is his own books, right? The Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Srila Prabhupada's book. So Srila Prabhupada's legacy will be carried on by his books. And that's, Prabhupada established the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust to carry on that legacy, to carry on the legacy, right, of Prabhupada and Prabhupada's preaching. Another way is by the books that were written by his followers, right? And there are many books. I've tried to get those books and keep them in the library, and I think we have many of those books in the library, but there may be some that we don't have. So that's one way to carry on Prabhupada's legacy, is to have those books available and to read them, right? And there are so many books. There's Shama Sundar's books, fabulous. Guru Das's book, Jamuna's book, Mukunda Maharaj's book, and the list goes on and on. So that's, you know, Satsvarup Maharaj's was the first biography, right? And it's in 7 volumes. How many people here have read all 7 volumes of the Lilamrita? Right? Well, that's not even 50%, you know. So this is a way to carry on Srila Prabhupada's legacy, are books that have been written about him. And there are many. We should make a list of all the books that have been written about Srila Prabhupada by, you know, various devotees, and make sure that we have them all enshrined in our library so that devotees can take advantage of them, right? And Giriraj Swami's book, I'll Build You a Temple, is one of the recent ones, and very fantastic things that you can learn about Srila Prabhupada and how he performed or propagated Krishna consciousness, but just him as a person. You know, Srila Prabhupada is a person. Extraordinary things. And especially for some of the early devotees, he many times revealed many mystic things that later on he didn't reveal to those first devotees. Shyam Sundar talks about how when we were with Prabhupada, we just always expected miracles to happen, and they would, right? He remembers that they rented a storefront in Haight-Ashbury, which was in San Francisco, where all the hippies lived in the 60s. But they got behind in the rent. Nobody had a job. Nobody had any money. So the rent, they were like 3 months behind in the rent. And he lived in an apartment with Malini, his wife, and they were coming to the temple one early morning, like 5:30 in the morning, and they were walking down Ashbury Street, and all of a sudden they saw this money was coming down the street by the wind. The wind was blowing $100 bills down the street. So they ran there and collected all the money, and that way they could pay the rent. So with Srila Prabhupada, they say, actually, they were hippies, right? And before he came to Krishna consciousness or to meet Prabhupada, he had been involved in a drug deal, and he had gotten arrested by the police. In those days, he got busted by the cops. So the court case was going on, and then finally the judgment came. He had to go to jail, and he might go for 2 years or 5 years to jail for this, arrested for selling drugs. So at that time, Srila Prabhupada was about to go back to New York after having been in San Francisco for 3 months. And finally they got up their courage, and he and Malati, who at that time her name was Malini, they went to meet Srila Prabhupada and say goodbye. And so he told Srila Prabhupada, so we're leaving now, Srila Prabhupada. He said, oh yes, where are you going? He said, well, Srila Prabhupada, we have to, go to jail. He said, oh really, what for? He said, well, we were selling drugs. And Prabhupada says, well, what's wrong with that? I used to sell drugs. So Shyama Sundar explained to him, illegal drugs and all that. So Srila Prabhupada told him, don't worry, Krishna will protect you. And he showed him how to make out of a piece of aluminum foil a set of japa beads. You roll up the foil and the farm. So he made a whole set for him and showed him how you could do it. And you can chant there. And don't worry, Krishna will protect you. He said, after all, Krishna was in jail. He was born in jail, in Kamsa's chair. And later on, Shyam Sundar, they went to jail, but they got out after a month for good behavior. And they could again join the service of the Swamiji, Srila Prabhupada. So like that, there's many things that we need to know, and very interesting. They're available in Srila Prabhupada's biography, written by so many different devotees. Yeah. We should read those, and we should keep them all here. Let's make a list of what we got, and then we can add to the list what's not there and try to acquire them, like Kurma's book. Kurma's book was called The Great Adventure. And The Great Adventure was Srila Prabhupada's pastimes in Australia. How Krishna consciousness started in Australia. Very interesting, Kurma's book. Have you read that one, Brajari? The Great Adventure? So like that, we should, the book's out of print, but I think we have copy in the library with Ananta Prabhu. You can check it out. Very interesting. So like that, we should get the books, we should read the books so that we have this understanding about the early devotees and experience with Srila Prabhupada. One interesting thing was, they were staying with Srila Prabhupada in John Lennon's estate. Had a big estate, posh place, and they were staying there. John Lennon had let them stay. They didn't, and Srila Prabhupada came, and he also stayed while, Berry Place was getting ready. And one morning, Srila Prabhupada was walking in the early morning, and behind him was Jamuna. She was walking behind him chanting. So she thought she should follow in the footsteps of her spiritual master. Wherever he stepped, she would step. And there was high grass, there was dew, right? A little moisture on the grass. But what she noticed is that wherever Srila Prabhupada stepped, he didn't leave an impression in the grass. And she looked back to where she was walking, and wherever she walked, there was an impression in the grass. But wherever he walked, there was no impression. And she followed him, and she was completely amazed that Prabhupada's footsteps didn't leave an impression in the wet grass. So at the end of the walk, she said, Srila Prabhupada, wherever you walked, there was no impression in the grass. How is that? And Srila Prabhupada said, one day I'll tell you. But he never told her. Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah. So there's these mystic things that happen to the early devotees, but Srila Prabhupada didn't reveal so much later on the mystical things to later on because, or for whatever reason, sometimes the devotees would misunderstand things. But when he was in Hyderabad, they asked him that, can you do some, do you have some mystic powers? I was there. It was a big pandal, 10,000 people in Hyderabad. Prabhupada was lecturing for a long time, and then he would take questions. Sometimes he liked the questions, sometimes he didn't. One time he said, these questions are all nonsense, just chant Hare Krishna. But this one person, what happened was they would write it on a piece of paper and Achyutananda would read out the question. The question was, can you show some mystic powers? And Prabhupada explained that the devotee of the Lord is not interested in mystic powers. Right? And having a desire for mystic powers is some material thing. The devotee is interested in only serving Krishna. So Krishna empowers the devotee to do things, and the devotee is not, trying to get mystic powers. But Srila Prabhupada said that if you want to see mystic powers, here's my mystic powers. I have turned Malechas into Brahmanas. And all the devotees went, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I have...
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Very nice, inspiring class. I remember that at one point when Bhima Prabhu has come in Bombay, early days, Prabhuji is our Sankirtan leader. And he used to travel with us. And in our bus, nobody know how to cook. So there was a problem for eating. So Prabhuji used to cook prasadam for us, khichdi. And devotees are very satisfied. and they were used to do long time for Sankirtan. And Prabhuji was doing Kirtan and helping us and seeing how I understood books and inspiring us. It was very, very enlivening for us that time.
Yeah, we used to eat khichdi twice a day.
Yes, Prabhuji.
I don't think devotees will do that today, right? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi.
Jai. Haribo.